one of Shedeur Sanders' teammates, Cedric Tillman, had an interview with one of the Cleveland media, and he asked him about the quarterback room when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, and Dylan Gabriel. Listen closely to what he had to say about the quarterback room of the Cleveland Browns this year.
Did you see this where he said, "I hate bleepy football"? What'd you think of that?
Coach keeps reminding us of that, so now I'm like, okay, yeah, we know he really doesn't like bleepy football and stuff like that.
The conversation surrounding the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation has started to take on a life of its own, building slowly at first and then gaining more attention as different voices begin to weigh in. And what makes it so compelling is that it no longer feels like a debate driven only by outside opinions. It feels like something that is developing from within the team itself, from the locker room, from the practice field, and from the subtle but meaningful ways players and media members are talking about what they are seeing. At the center of it all is a growing sense that this is not a settled situation, not a foregone conclusion, and definitely not something that can be decided based purely on past reputation or financial investment. And that realization is what has begun to shift the tone of the entire discussion. When a teammate like Cedric Tillman is asked about the quarterback room and responds by saying that all three quarterbacks have something to prove, it may sound like a safe and diplomatic answer, but underneath that surface is an important truth. Because players do not speak that way when a position is already locked down, they don't frame things as a competition unless it truly is one. And that alone opens the door to a much deeper question about what is really happening behind the scenes.
That was brought in last year for the Cleveland Browns. He had to say a lot about the quarterback room, but he also said each quarterback got something to prove this year. Both of them, all three of them looking good, and we done seen the footage and we done seen the video of the practice from yesterday and today of Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. Now, when it comes to that quarterback room, there's a lot of people, and especially people in the national media and the local media, are trying to say and believe that Deshaun Watson.
As more attention is placed on practice performances and player interactions, a clearer picture begins to form. And in that picture, Shedeur Sanders is not just another name in the mix. He is emerging as a legitimate contender who is steadily building momentum, not through hype or noise, but through consistency, composure, and the kind of presence that teammates naturally gravitate toward. There is something about the way he carries himself that suggests he is comfortable in this environment, that he understands the expectations, and that he is not intimidated by the challenge in front of him, and those qualities matter more than anything when it comes to earning trust in a locker room filled with professionals who are all trying to win. On the other side of the equation is Deshaun Watson, a player whose past success and significant contract continue to keep him in the conversation. Yet at the same time, there is an undeniable question surrounding his current form, his rhythm, and his ability to step back into a high-level role after time away from consistent live action, and that uncertainty is what creates the tension at the heart of this competition. The narrative that Watson is the default starter has been repeated often enough that it has almost become an assumption, particularly in national media circles. But when that assumption is compared to what is actually being observed on the field, it begins to feel less solid, less certain, and more like a storyline that has not yet caught up with reality. Football at its core is about execution, timing, and decision-making under pressure, and those elements cannot be measured by past achievements alone. They have to be demonstrated in the present, in real time, against real competition, and that is where the evaluation becomes more honest and more revealing. Shedeur Sanders, coming in with recent playing experience and a sense of urgency, appears to be embracing that reality, using every opportunity to show what he can do, while Watson is in a position where he must prove that he can regain the level of play that once defined him, and until that proof is consistently visible, the gap between expectation and performance remains a central theme.
The race for quarterback one, a close one. Who knows? I might be wrong on this. I don't think I am. I really don't. I think it's Shedeur versus himself. And then if somehow Shedeur loses in Shedeur versus himself, if they have no other option, I think that's the case in which Deshaun Watson starts week one.
Sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I don't even think it's close. I think it's like a 85-15, 90-10 type situation. But then you have guys like Charles Davis come on, and they're talking in a way that it's almost like it's certain that it's going to be Deshaun Watson. And it's like, where do you get this from?
Yeah, and it's funny, like Charles was
As the buildup continues, the situation begins to approach a climax, where the accumulation of small moments, successful plays, missed opportunities, and overall performance trends start to converge into a clearer outcome. This is the phase where speculation gives way to expectation, where the question is no longer whether there is a competition, but who is going to emerge from it as the leader. And the answer to that question carries significant implications not just for the quarterback position, but for the entire team. A quarterback sets the tone, influences confidence, and shapes the rhythm of the offense, and choosing the right one can elevate the performance of everyone around him, while choosing the wrong one can create uncertainty and inconsistency. In this context, Shedeur Sanders' rise becomes more than just a storyline. It becomes a potential turning point, a shift in direction that reflects a broader commitment to performance, growth, and forward momentum. His ability to maintain composure, to execute under pressure, and to steadily build trust places him in a position where he is not just competing, but actively challenging the existing expectations. And that challenge is what creates the tension and excitement surrounding this entire situation. At the same time, Deshaun Watson's position becomes one of urgency, where he must not only respond to the competition, but do so in a way that leaves no doubt about his capability to lead, because anything less than that leaves the door open for change. As the situation moves toward its resolution, the focus inevitably shifts to what is best for the team, what provides the greatest chance for success, and what aligns with the goals the organization is trying to achieve. The noise from outside opinions begins to fade in importance compared to the clarity that comes from internal evaluation, and the decision, when it finally comes, will reflect not just a choice between two players, but a statement about the direction the team is choosing to take. Whether that direction involves a resurgence from a veteran or the emergence of a new leader, it will be rooted in the performances that have unfolded over time, in the evidence that has been gathered through practices, observations, and competition. In the end. What began as a simple discussion about a quarterback room evolves into something much larger. A reflection of how teams make decisions, how players earn trust, and how performance ultimately shapes opportunity. And as the Cleveland Browns continue to move forward, the outcome of this competition will serve as a defining moment, not just for the players involved, but for the identity of the team as a whole. Because in football, as in any competitive environment, the path forward is determined not by what is expected, but by what is proven. As the decision point draws closer, the intensity surrounding the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation only continues to grow, and what once felt like a quiet internal competition is now beginning to carry visible weight, not just in practices, but in the way the entire organization is being discussed. Every throw, every rep, every small moment is being watched more closely. Not just by coaches and teammates, but by a fan base that is eager for clarity and direction. And in that environment, pressure becomes a defining factor, because how a player responds to that pressure often reveals more than any stat line or highlight ever could. For Shedeur Sanders, this phase represents an opportunity to separate himself in a way that goes beyond performance alone. It becomes about command, about presence, about showing that he can not only execute the offense, but lead it, elevate it, and stabilize it in moments where things are not perfect. Young quarterbacks are often judged not just by what they do when everything is working, but by how they respond when things break down, when the pocket collapses, when the timing is disrupted, and when decisions have to be made instantly under pressure. These are the moments that build trust, and trust once established can shift an entire locker room. At the same time, Deshaun Watson finds himself in a position where expectations are no longer based on what he once was, but on what he can currently deliver. The margin for error becomes smaller, the scrutiny becomes sharper, and the need for consistency becomes more urgent. There is an understanding that talent alone is not enough, that flashes are not enough, and that in order to reclaim control of the position, he must demonstrate a level of reliability that leaves no room for doubt. And in a competition where another quarterback is steadily building momentum, that task becomes even more challenging. What makes this stage particularly compelling is the way momentum begins to influence perception. Momentum is not always loud or obvious, but it is powerful. It builds through repetition, through consistent execution, through small wins that accumulate over time. Teammates begin to feel it, coaches begin to recognize it, and gradually, it starts to shape the narrative in a way that cannot be ignored. And when momentum aligns with performance, it creates a sense of inevitability, a feeling that the outcome is beginning to reveal itself even before it is officially kosher. As conversations continue both inside and outside the organization, the focus begins to shift toward what the offense actually looks like under each quarterback. Because ultimately, the decision is not just about individual performance, it is about fit, rhythm, and overall effectiveness. Different quarterbacks bring different styles, different tempos, and different ways of seeing the field, and those differences can have a significant impact on how the entire unit functions. With Shedeur Sanders, there appears to be a growing sense of fluidity, a natural rhythm that allows the offense to move efficiently. Timing with receivers becomes sharper, decisions come quicker, and the ball tends to come out with confidence. These are subtle details, but they matter, especially in a league where the margin between success and failure is often defined by fractions of a second. When an offense feels in sync, it becomes easier for everyone to perform at a higher level, from the offensive line to the skill position players. On the other hand, with Deshaun Watson, the evaluation becomes more layered, because the expectations are higher and the standard is already established. The question is not whether he can perform, but whether he can perform at a level that elevates the team consistently. There are moments where his ability is evident, where his experience shows, and where his playmaking instincts come through. But consistency remains the key factor. In a competitive environment, consistency often outweighs flashes because coaches value predictability when it comes to executing a game plan. Another element that begins to play a role is communication, not just in terms of play calls, but in leadership. Quarterbacks are expected to be the voice of the offense, the ones who keep everyone aligned, focused, and confident. Teammates respond to clarity, to decisiveness, and to the sense that the person leading them is fully in control. These qualities are not always visible from the outside, but they are felt strongly within the locker room, and they can influence how players rally around a particular leader. As the competition moves closer to its final stages, the role of decision-makers becomes increasingly important because at some point, evaluation must turn into action. Coaches and front office personnel must take everything they have observed, everything they have measured, and translate it into a decision that will shape the direction of the team moving forward. And in doing so, they must balance multiple factors: performance, potential, experience, financial implications, and most importantly, the ability to win. For the Cleveland Browns, this decision carries weight beyond just the quarterback position, because it sends a message about what the organization values. Choosing a quarterback based on current performance signals a commitment to accountability and competition, while leaning on past investment suggests a different kind of approach, one that prioritizes stability and long-term planning. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but each comes with its own set of consequences. What makes this moment Nirnayak is the clarity that begins to emerge. After weeks of observation, patterns become difficult to ignore. Strengths and weaknesses are no longer theoretical, they are visible, repeated, and understood. The conversation shifts from what could happen to what has been happening, and that shift brings a level of honesty that cannot be avoided. Decisions made at this stage are not based on hope, they are based on evidence. And yet, even with that clarity, there is always an element of risk because projecting future performance is never an exact science. Coaches must trust their evaluation, trust their instincts, and trust the culture they are trying to build. In a competitive league, hesitation can be costly, but so can rushing a decision without full conviction. Finding that balance is what separates good organizations from great ones. As everything begins to settle and the outcome approaches, the significance of this quarterback competition becomes even more apparent because it represents more than just a battle for a starting role, it represents a moment of transformation. Teams often reach points where they must decide whether to hold on to the past or move toward the future. And those decisions shape not only their immediate success, but their long-term identity. For Shedeur Sanders, this journey reflects the possibility of emergence, of stepping into a role and proving that preparation, confidence, and performance can outweigh expectation. For Deshaun Watson, it represents a chance at resurgence, an opportunity to reaffirm his place and demonstrate that he can still perform at a level that commands trust and respect. In the end, the answer will not come from speculation, debate, or outside opinion. It will come from what has been shown, from what has been earned, and from what the team believes gives them the best chance to succeed. And when that decision is finally made, it will not just define the starting quarterback, it will define the direction of the Cleveland Browns moving forward. Because in the world of football, where competition is constant and pressure is unavoidable, one principle remains true above all else. Opportunity is earned, not given, and the path forward always belongs to the one who proves it.